Okay, so continuing our conversation here about audio signals, volume, the console, all this kind of stuff, we need to talk about clipping. So clipping is super important to know about, and I want to make sure I'm very clear about it. Real world audio systems and the digital audio systems, like your computer sound card or a stereo in your house or your car stereo or your guitar amplifier or whatever it happens to be, essentially have a maximum volume that system can withstand. Now I'm simplifying things a lot, but the main point is going to get across. When the volume of a sound or the power of a sound exceeds or goes above the maximum value that system can take, clipping occurs. So I want to give you a visual representation of what clipping is. So let's take a look at it here. Here I have a sine wave, which is just a pure tone. And you can see the waveform here, look in the oscilloscope. And remember that the height above the middle line is how loud it is. That's the amplitude. That's how loud the sound is. Now, I'm going to start turning it up using my volume slider down here, and we're going to see what happens when it starts clipping. You hear that? It starts to change how the sound is. Here it's really pure and simple. And here it starts to get a different bunch of tones in it, new harmonics. And watch what happens. Look at the bottom of the waveform. Notice how these get squares, squared off bottoms. They're actually squared off tops too, though you can't really see them right now. That's what clipping is. The top and bottom of the waveform get clipped. The top of this here, top and bottom of this display are representing the maximum volume that we can play at before clipping. And as soon as it starts to exceed that, the peaks of those waveforms get clipped and they become square and they come back down. And when they become square, they distort. Now, distortion just means that the perfect sine wave gets altered, it gets changed, it gets distorted, and it doesn't sound like it used to. It changes the sound. Sometimes this is a good thing. In terms of, say, guitar amplifiers, we distort the guitar on purpose for rock music and various kinds of music because it sounds nice, and we learned how to control that distortion. But in this digital world, when we're dealing with our music in Studio One, we do not want clipping. This is like number one thing to know. No clipping. Clipping will cause distortion in your track that is not pleasant to listen to. It is possible to use clipping intentionally and create pleasing effects with it, but we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about unintentional clipping that's happening and you didn't know it was happening. We want to avoid that. So let's talk about, where do you see clipping inside of Studio One and how does it happen? The first thing is we need to open the console. So I'm going to look at my mix view here. And now I have all my tracks. So I'm going to come to my tie track here. I'm going to put it back to 0. Now I want to play this note again. Now look at where it's reading on the meter. If I get my little thing here, we're looking at about minus 4.1 decibels. And it's the same over here on my master meter, right there. Now if I start turning up this fader, watch what happens. Actually, I'm going to turn this off just so we can see. Aha, you see we get this little thing here, this little red square. This is telling us we're clipping. Anytime this thing turns on, we're clipping. It's actually the same down here. This is a representation of our master volume, and here we can see clipping. We can even see that it's clipping here on where it's above 0 anyway on our track, which is fine because of the way we're working in Studio One in our 32-bit mode. We can have sounds that go into the red in our individual channels, but the master channel, if it is clipping, it will cause distortion. That's where that distortion we're listening to is coming from. If we turn down the master channel, it goes away. Even though this one is still like super hot, super high up, if we bring this back up to 0, you can see we're clipping like mad now. I can bring it up more. I'm gonna get more distortion, lots of distortion. So this is what's going to let us know for clipping. How that's going to happen is that maybe one sound on its own is not clipping. Say we have our bass guitar or something and it's playing and it sounds fine, but when we add everything in all together, it might be too loud for the system, and when it all gets put together into the master channel, it might cause clipping. And that will change the sound of our song. It will distort the sound and won't sound very nice, because digital clipping is generally quite a bad sound. We're hearing it on a pure tone right now, but when you play a whole mix through it and clip the whole mix, it can sound even worse than that. So this is something to be avoided basically at all costs, and how you avoid it is by watching for it and making sure you keep your levels on your faders relatively low. Most instruments and loops and all the stuff that we're using in our songs come to us with very high levels, very high volume. This is so that everything is easy to hear, and when you're auditioning them in the browser, you can hear it at a good level relative to other things. But when we start using it in the track, we need to turn them down. If we leave everything at full volume, as soon as they get put together in the master track, master channel, they're going to clip. So when we're mixing, we need to be very aware for clipping. Even when we're composing, we should be aware of clipping, and check in here on our master channel fader or a master channel meter down here, and we can go into the mix mode, mix view, and look at the master channel over here and see if it's clipping. It's something that we need to be keenly aware of, because it will essentially ruin our song, and if we don't know about clipping, we won't know where it's coming from. Now, it is actually possible to have clipping not on the master channel as well. When we start looking at plugins, which are our inserts that we put here on our tracks, we can clip inside of the plugins too. That can cause distortion as well. So we need to watch out for that too, but it's not as easy or as likely to happen as it is on the master channel, because in the master channel, everything's getting put together. So the takeaways from this video are: clipping occurs when the volume is too loud for the system. And what clipping is it means that the waveforms get squared off. They get clipped. The top of them is like a scissors, clipped the round part of the waveform and made it square, and it causes distortion, which ruins our sound. So it's good from now on to start being aware of your overall volume and looking on your meter here to see if you're clipping, because when it comes time to listen to your music or export the song from Studio One so you can listen to it on your iPod or whatever, and it's clipping, you're going to have a real problem. So in the next video, we're going to talk a little bit more about the console and about this sidebar over here and some of the options we have there. And following that, we're going to start getting into actually using some effects on our tracks via these insert slots we have here.